In this demo, we will show you how to leverage data you have in Watsonx.data as a graph using PuppyGraph. The data set we will look at today will contain some data stored in iceberg tables such as person, knows, software, and created. This data set essentially encapsulates a scenario where different developers have either created and/or know different software and programming language. As you can see from the SQL statement we will generate and run, we can see that we have 4 entries in the persons table. Let's look at how to get this data into a graph using PuppyGraph, and first we're going to log into PuppyGraph to do that. After we've logged in, we then need to create our schema. This can be done using PuppyGraph's Create Graph Schema UI or by uploading an easy to create graph schema JSON file. Of course, if you don't have a schema or data set, but want to try out PuppyGraph, you can use an example schema here as well. In this demo, we will use the Create Graph Schema UI to map our data from Watsonx into PuppyGraph. To do that, let's click the Create Graph Schema button near the top of the screen. On the next screen, we will choose the catalog type as Presto and set the catalog name as test_Watsonx. Then, we will need to grab our user credentials from our Watsonx.data API so that PuppyGraph can connect to the catalog. Then we will need to grab our JDBC URI, which can be found back in Watsonx. This can be found under the Configurations menu and then underneath the Connection Information tab. Back in PuppyGraph, we will need to add the port and database name we would like to point to. Additionally, we can set SSL equal to true. With the details plugged in, we can then click Submit to connect to the data source. In the next screen, PuppyGraph will put the schema from the Watsonx tables and allow us to create the vertices and edges that will make up our graph schema. In this example, we will also use the AutoSuggest function, which will infer a graph schema for us out of the tables and data available. As you can see, the graph schema was successfully created, and now we can submit it to the server. Once the process is complete, you can then see that the schema has been uploaded to PuppyGraph, and we can begin working with the underlying SQL data as a graph. By clicking on the different parts of the uploaded schema, we can also see the tables and fields where the data is being mapped into the graph from Watsonx. Before getting into running some graph queries, let's briefly show the PuppyGraph dashboard screen where you can save queries and display them in different formats, including as a table or as a graph visualization. Now, let's go ahead and run some graph queries on the underlying SQL data. First, we will run a query that finds the paths from max of 10 vertices to their connected vertices via outgoing edges. In the result, as you click and drag nodes around the visualization pane, you'll see the edges and node details expand, as well as the corresponding queries show up on the left side to uncover more details. Next, let's run a query to find all the people that a specific person knows. In this case, we'll try to find out all the people that Marco knows. After this, you can right-click on a node and select Expand with all edge labels. This will then expand the visible elements within the graph visualization. In this case, we will then see the software associated with this particular user without having to write a query by hand. Next, and lastly, we will run a query to find all people who created software using a specific programming language. In this case, we will look for all people who developed software written in Java.